Welcome to the latest edition of Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. I'm your host, David Nolan, the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at the Academy. In this edition, I'll be speaking with Patrick Collins, who shows how the actuarial profession opens doors around the world. Patrick, welcome to Actuary Voices.
Thank you very much. I'm blessed in so many ways. My wife is an amazing woman. We've been married for 26 years. We have two adult sons who I'm really proud of. And I'm also reasonably healthy. And when you have your health, you pretty much have everything, don't you?
Oh, I agree. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an actuary. What was your path towards this profession?
Yeah, it was fascinating for me. I was born and raised in New Jersey. And since I was very young, let's say since I was 12 years old or so, I became fascinated with computers and software. And this was the time when the personal computer was starting to come into our homes and our offices. And I was convinced at that age that I wanted to spend my life being a software developer. And I was a football player. And in my senior year, I was an all Central Jersey All Star. So I wanted to continue to play football. So I elected to go to St. John's University, close by in New York City, where they had a Division III football program at the time. So, of course, I majored in computer science. And I had always done well in math in high school, and I continued to get A's in my math classes in college. Sometime during my sophomore year, my guidance counselor encouraged me to take more math classes, and if I did, I would get a minor in math. I had absolutely no idea what I would do with that, but I did, and I kept getting A's in math. And in the spring of my senior year at St. John's, I was doing job interviews on campus. And the way that worked is you put your paper resume into a basket for the jobs that you were interested in, and then the recruiters would pick up that resumes and decide who they wanted to interview. So, of course, I immediately went to the computer jobs, put my resumes in. And as I was doing this, I noticed that there were these jobs called actuaries. And those interviews were a week before the computer jobs. I had no idea what an actuary was at that time. I didn't take any exams yet, but it did say math on the job description, and I had a really good grade point average. So I put my resume into those actuarial baskets, hoping I might get some interviews. And my rationale at the time was that if I could learn about the actuarial career, and that the worst case scenario is I would get some interview practice for my computer interviews the following week. So it turns out that I hit it off on one of my interviews with a local insurance company, and I got a job offer. And they took a risk on me, so thank you, Bruce, for doing that. And I really thought the job at the time would be a really nice mix of computers and math. And in retrospect, it turned out to be true. So yeah, that's a bit of a non-traditional path to get to the actuarial profession, wouldn't you think?
I would say that interview practice leading to a career is certainly somewhat unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't looked back since those days at St. John's?
I have not.
So tell us what practice you started in, and maybe what your day-to-day looks like.
Well, I'll tell you a bit about the how I evolved into where I am, because I started out is what I would call your traditional actuarial role, certainly at the time. I was an actuarial student in the actuarial student program, where they were intended to rotate you through different jobs. So I started out in the pension area. Then I moved on to the life insurance area for a little while. And I ultimately ended in the group benefits area. And at the time, there was a lot of focus on the medical side. So I really became more of a medical and health expert. And I did your traditional actuarial jobs at that point. I was doing pricing, product development, and reserving. And one day I got a call from a reinsurance company, and they were starting a brand new accident and health reinsurance unit. And I had heard of reinsurance, but I didn't really even know what it was. So I liked what I heard, and I took the job. And it was a very small team. And in a small team, everybody gets involved in everything, and the specialization is a lot less. So I got to do other things. And what I realized was that what I really liked and what I really enjoyed was talking with client insurance companies, with managing general underwriters and third party administrators and brokers, I enjoyed the program design. And in reinsurance, every account is unique in its own way. So they came to me and said, "We really think you ought to be a reinsurance underwriter." And to me, that was a fork in the road, because when you envision your life as being an actuary doing actuarial things, and then they offer you something clearly outside of that, it caused me pause. And I said, "Do I really want to leave and go down this road?" Ultimately, though, I did take the leap, and it was a really exciting time, because I was going into uncharted territory for me. But there, I developed some new products. I helped enter into new markets, some very non-standard risk programs that I had worked on. Years later, I started participating on these acquisition teams where you would look to buy other companies and operations. And on one of these acquisition teams that we were actually successful in the acquisition, they asked me to actually run the integration where they would integrate this company that we had bought into ours. And I did that. And in the end of that integration, they offered me a job out at this company. And that was an adventure, because I actually moved my family from my comfort zone in the northeastern United States all the way out to the West Coast in the Pacific Northwest. And I took this job that they had offered me. And from that point on, I ended up taking what I would call various types of executive roles, which were further and further away from my actuarial training. So I was a business unit head where I had profit and loss responsibility. I did some corporate strategy. I even spent time overseeing some teams like corporate communications and government relations and a project management office. My last two roles were as the chief operating officer, where I managed global teams, both on the insurance and reinsurance side, in functions like underwriting and business intelligence and finance and IT and claims and policy administration and customer service. So it deviated very, very much from my traditional actuarial role, but it's been exciting and fun. And I've always been able to put those core actuarial skills that I used to use throughout my career.
Patrick, I heard an awful lot of different roles in there. Many of them struck me, but customer service was one I didn't see coming. What was the connection between your training as an actuary and customer service? How did that come about?
Well, I've always, what I come to learn in insurance is when you're selling insurance, you're selling a service. And it's not tangible in a physical way, but it's still very important. And effectively, what you're doing is you're providing comfort in the presence of uncertainty, and you're entering into a contract where you're making a commitment to perform in the time of need. So as I took on this role, I really focused on things like what I called the stakeholder experience and the voice of the customer. And what we did was we looked at what we called the key customer journeys. And this is where I applied my actuarial training, in the sense that you broke it up into different pieces, and then you started measuring and then managing what you're measuring, and trying to hear the voice from the customer's perspective was the goal that I was trying to achieve. And so what we did was we started to quantify how our experience went. I put these surveys together called Net Promoter Score surveys, where we wanted to understand and measure quantifiably what was working and what wasn't, and then take that feedback and put that back into improving the journey, accentuating what was good, fixing what was bad. And what I really appreciated about doing that was I actually saw the effect that the work that the team was having and how it impacted our customers' lives. And it reinforced to me that at the end of the day, there's a human being at the other end of that. And what we did every day mattered. And I think when the organization uh, realized that what they did mattered every day, it gave them like a principled reason, why they get up and do what they do every day.
That rings true to me in many ways, Patrick, because one of the things that periodically comes up in this podcast is that actuaries really value the fact that they're having real impacts on the lives of real people, and it gives them a real sense of pride in their daily work.
It does.
One other thing you mentioned was product development, and I presume that your keen interest in software from an early age helped you there. Tell me, is it usual to be developing new products, or is that kind of a niche area for an actuary?
Well, I would say this: products are always evolving, technologies are always evolving, regulations are always evolving, and customer preferences are always evolving, and certainly competition is forcing things to change. So, a product development to me is more like a constant process. Um, it is rare that you come out with some brand new game changing product, out of the gate. And it is even more rare that those new game changing products are successful right out of the gate. You're usually um, trying to incrementally improve an existing product. I have had a few experiences where I've had some brand new products coming out that were on the new side, and they did work out reasonably well. But I've also had some where they didn't work out so well at first, and then you had to make an adjustment, you had to pivot, and you had to constantly let it evolve and move it in the right direction. It's very interesting, always iterative in my view.
Sounds good. Your career is an object lesson in the fact that your training as an actuary can lead you in many, many different directions. A lot of actuaries stay doing a similar thing for a large part of their career, but others branch out into all sorts of different directions. And it's a real advertisement for the profession writ large, I would say.
I'd say so, and from my own experience, there are all these things that I learned throughout my training as an actuary. So breaking up larger tasks into smaller pieces, um, performing under pressure, like you do in the actuarial exams, the planning process that you have to do to get there, the fact that you should ask for help and realize that you don't need to be the expert in literally everything. Just know where those experts are and how to utilize them. Was great training. I'm still using that to this day.
Right. One of the things that I've noticed is that what sets actuaries apart from data analysts and others in adjacent fields is the professionalism training, the professionalism aspects of your career. Can you share an example or two when your professionalism training came in really useful, that it made a difference in some decisions either that you or others made?
Well, I do think that actuaries have a distinct and valuable place in the business world. The formalized training, the professionalism, the code of conduct, the standards of practice, the continuing education, amazing foundation there for a solid profession. And it develops by following those and believing in it. The work product that gets performed ends up being something that people can be confident in and they can trust. And I have um, typically referred back to things like standards of practice and my training and the continuing education as a reference point to um, whenever I had any questions about where I should go. I always fell back on my training, right, which is typically what you do, particularly when you're under stress. And it's very comfortable to know that they're there and to be able to rely on them for some guidance when you need it.
Okay, so a solid foundation is something that's vitally important no matter what aspect of your job you're going to do.
Right.
I'd like to move on to talk about some of the challenges that you think the profession is facing now and the opportunities where you see things moving in the next few years.
Well, I think there's always new um, professions coming into the play. So there were always modelers, developers, and analysts, but now there's things like data scientists and artificial intelligence and machine learning. Um, so the formalized training and the professional standards provide that solid foundation. And in my experience, the one thing that I've seen is that, actuaries have a unique place in that they know that all data is flawed to varying degrees. So they never assume that data that they see is 100% correct. They also know that models, by definition, are an approximation to the real world, and they're not perfect reflections of the real world. So they take the time to understand those flaws and to put that into context when reaching conclusions. And they are nuanced and practical when they're making those decisions on a day to day basis. Both of my sons are engineers. And what they taught me is that engineering is applied science. And the way I see it is actuaries, to a certain degree, are the engineers in the world of risk and insurance, and they do it in a very effective way. And I think that foundation that provides means that any of these new technologies that are coming around are only going to turbocharge the profession and not really put it at risk.
Thank you for listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast listening platform. You can learn more about the Academy at actuary.org. And now, back to my conversation with Patrick Collins. Patrick, to change tack a little bit, let's talk about your current role and where that brings you, both in your career and as regards other aspects of your work.
Well, I would say this. My last few roles have been global roles, and for over 11 years now. And I've worked with teams all over the world. And one of the things that I saw where each country, is different and unique in its own way, whether it be the US or England or the Philippines or India or Serbia or Ireland. And learning and appreciating those nuances, whether it be currency or culture or regulatory or language, um, managing through more using diplomacy rather than authority, um, has been something that I've really been able to appreciate, understanding and working my way through those. The other thing that I learned is that insurance at the end of the day is still selling, quoting, underwriting, collecting premium, paying claims, and providing high quality support. So there's a lot of commonality there too, and a lot of common ground. And mixing those two together has been absolutely fascinating.
So tell me, as a matter of interest, when you're working overseas or doing work for overseas clients, you obviously need to follow their regulations and laws. But are there any qualifications that you have to seek out in order to practice there?
Generally, there are, and generally, I relied on the local country-specific actuaries who had those qualifications and training to be able to give those insights and make those certifications or anything that was needed to be done locally.
Patrick, I'm always interested in what our guests do for fun. I know you're obviously very busy in your work life, but I presume you set aside some time for personal fulfillment.
Well, my wife and I learned to sail together when we were dating, and I proposed to her on a sailboat. And so now what we do in the summertime in particular, we love to take our boat down to the bay as often as we can. And the life lesson I learned with sailing is it's constantly about observing and adapting to the conditions around you. There's a saying that you cannot change the wind, but you can always adjust your sails. And for me, that's a life lesson. The other thing that I do for fun is I participate on a sport that few have heard of called dragon boating, and that is a team sport. It's on a boat, of course. The standard boat is about 40 feet long. It has 20 paddlers, 10 rows, one on the left and one on the right, has a drummer in the front and a steersman in the back. And when I moved back to the Northeast from the Pacific Northwest, I reconnected with an old friend who encouraged me to join. And the organization had just started a new mixed team, which is a combination of both men and women. And they were looking for some men. And I was looking to meet new people and get some exercise and have some fun. So I joined. And we practice on the Delaware River in New Hope, Pennsylvania. We race multiple times a year all over the country. and I really enjoy it. One of the lessons I learned through that is, unlike other sports, like say football, which I did when I was younger, no one person with a heroic event can propel the boat forward. Each person in each seat has equal value, and it really takes all of us working hard in tandem to be able to win. So, and then of course, this Dragon Boat organization tapped some of my uh, managerial and technical expertise about 8 years ago. So I've been the treasurer for a while, and now I remain on the board to this day.
Great. I presume they're called dragon boats because of the ferocious heads that they often have in front of them?
Exactly. They're very colorful and very impressive. Actually, if you see the races, it's a lot of fun.
And do teams design their own boats or do you buy them off the shelf, so to speak?
We don't. We buy them off the shelf, but it is. There are some different style boats, and it's a great fun to see them on the water during the racing time.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks. I'd like to end with one other thing. The American Academy of Actuaries recently developed a student resource center for aspiring actuaries, or people who, as you were at the beginning of your career, aren't sure what an actuary was and are interested in finding out. And I wonder if you were to give some advice to somebody who's about to send out their resume or drop it in a basket at a jobs fair, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, what was interesting when I was first looking at the actuarial profession is it was rated as one of the number one careers from a number of different factors. But what I realized, now that I've been in it for a while, is it gives you the technical training, which is kind of what everybody thinks about, the math and the statistics and that kind of thing and the modeling. But the other types of training, which is the professionalism, the regulatory, the finance accounting, and also working with other people in various departments and various fields, it really provides a very well-rounded experience. And through that, you can choose through your own skill set and through your own personality type which one of those and which mix of those is the right one for you. And so, for most, I would argue, they could find the right balance that works for them.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Was there anything else you'd like to talk about that I didn't ask you?
Well, the only other thing I can think of is that I felt that it's very important to give and support my community, my profession, and helping others when I can. To me, it's kind of what defines someone as a professional. And so, after getting my fellowship, I worked with the Society of Actuaries on the exam process. I helped develop the questions and I helped grade the exams afterwards. And I did that for about 10 years. Along the way, I started volunteering for the Academy. And I did issue briefs and the actuarial standards of practice, and I did some Hill visits. And the Hill visits were fascinating because it was educating and informing policymakers in Washington, D.C. And here it was great because you could provide, let's call it an unbiased perspective on actuarial issues. And at that time, in the medical insurance world, there were heavy discussions about laws and regulations that ultimately became the Affordable Care Act. And I was even asked to give congressional testimony to a small business committee, which was very interesting and exciting. And what I would say is getting yourself involved in these things has not only been rewarding, but it also opened up some doors. It opens up some doors in terms of skill sets, in terms of people that you meet and experiences that you have. And I would invite everybody to open up themselves to giving back in those ways to enrich others, but also enrich themselves.
A lot of it by putting yourself in situations in which you may not be totally comfortable and
Oh, exactly.
figuring out how to work your way through that.
Exactly.
Patrick, thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You certainly had one of the more wide-ranging careers of the guests we've had.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful, and I'm really appreciate the experiences I've had and all the friends that I've made along the way.
Thank you for listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Today, I was talking to Patrick Collins, a longtime Academy volunteer, whose career shows how being an actuary can open doors around the world. We are on the web at actuary.org, where you'll find information about our work and how you can become an Academy volunteer. Thanks again for listening.